I offer these every week along with a guided meditation. Just click the subscribe link below to be notified through YouTube when I post the latest recording. Or if you'd like to join us live, which would be great, just go into the description section below and follow the link along to be able to sign up for free. I'd like to explore with you how we can integrate or connect the Buddha's wisdom with some modern psychology and neuropsychology and just common sense about what I'm going to call turning a corner. I thought of titling this Turning the Corner, but I think that's too particular. I think we turn lots of corners. So I'm going to be exploring with you turning a corner and perhaps multiple times of turning a corner, including different corners. So I suggest to make this kind of concrete. You think about a sticky situation you're involved with, or a relationship, or maybe a kind of complicated entangling related to your own history, in which you're maybe really reflecting on perhaps some mistakes you've made, or some opportunities that just didn't happen, or ways you were wronged and mistreated. How can you turn a corner about that? So lots of examples. I think it's helpful to find one or two for yourself. And I'll use a variety of examples here. Just before we started here, half an hour or so before, I got a response from a friend of mine with whom I'm getting together quite soon. And with that friend and the getting together of it all, there were some ways in which my friend maybe was a little demanding about the food we bring or whatever the details are. Just let that go. I asked my friend, gee, can you tell me your address again? It's been a while. And my friend replied, my address is this, and you ask for this every time you come over, put it in your address book. Harumph. Right? Okay, maybe we should all do it together. Harumph. It just arises in the mind. Okay, what do we do then? And in my own case, I saw that harumph arising, and I thought, I don't want to get into it with my friend. And so I know I'm going to reply in a clean way. Why not capture the value of replying in a clean way without getting contentious with my friend? And I looked in my address book. Oh, I had not put it in my address book in my phone. And I replied, oops, you're right. Thank you. Sorry, I put it in my phone now. Walk away. Bliss of blamelessness. And I really like my friend. I know that they're dealing with a lot and their life's complicated, and they tend to be kind of persnickety. That's a little bit their style, Okay, I chose to turn a corner. Now we each get to decide whether we turn the corner. Or alternately, we say to them, harumph, or as chats are coming in, how rude, right? Gadzooks. Huh. Okay. We have to choose whether it rises to that level. And, that level will depend on how we're feeling and how much food we've eaten recently and so on. You get to decide. But for yourself, you could ask yourself, all right, they did this, and then I have a fork in the road in front of me. Which is better for me? Which is in more my self-interest? Out of care and concern and loyalty to yourself, what is in your best interest? Is it to pile on and start pouring what the Buddha called nutrition in fuel into the fire? Or is it in your best interest in some way to disengage and turn a corner? Now, sometimes we muzzle ourselves, especially if we've been socialized into doing that, into being nice and compliant and choosing harmony over truth again and again and again. And then afterward, though, we feel kind of sick inside. We feel like we betrayed ourselves, maybe. We really let ourselves down. We let that other person push us around. And we don't feel good about it. Then what do we do? Well, first of all, preventing that in the first place is where we have that ounce of prevention rather than later on a pound of cure. Trying to, feel into how you actually want to be. I find often there's kind of a middle place in which we don't get reactive with other people while still replying with a certain amount of class. What would Miss Manners do? We can definitely communicate a certain self-respect and civility and gravitas that, does not make other people wrong, does not expose us to ridicule or counter complaints, and yet very quietly kind of sends a message that maybe will lead that person the next time to be a little more reflective before they do something that, before they get kind of bristly. I see that word, Ole, kind of bristly with us, right? There's that place, so preventing it. But what happens if you take the higher road, but you're still mad? How do we turn corners on our own inner reactions? And the Buddha has offered a tremendous amount of very skillful advice and practices with regard to this that have been now, whose value has been really consistently established in decades of research broadly with regard to mental practices and clinical psychology. So one thing he talks about is recognizing the various elements, the compoundedness, the various parts that make up our reaction. So we want to help ourselves turn a corner and come to peace, but we're still mad. We still feel hurt. Well, one excellent technique, he talks about it again and again, is just to look directly into your own experience. Nothing woo-woo metaphysical about this. What are the sensations in your body of, let's say, irritation or exasperation or feeling wronged? What are the sensations in your body? Many sensations. How about emotions? Right? How about thoughts? How about desires? Unpacking, unpacking, unpacking. And what about what is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral in what we're experiencing? Just that unpacking often helps us turn a corner with regard to those reactions. They don't feel so weighty. And as I said before we officially began, there's more of a sense of spaciousness. What is not the reaction? Present in awareness. That's a beautiful thing. He also has this recurring instruction that I've reflected on many times. When, in other words, he says, when you're having a reaction, observe the gratification in it, the reward value, the dopamine rush, that sense of righteousness, maybe. Like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm superior, you're not. I know and you don't. Gratifications of various kinds. Maybe the gratifications of bunkering up and turning away and dissociating. Gratifications. 1. 2, recognize the danger. That's a translation of an ancient word, but that's commonly used. The gratifications and the danger. What are the risks to you in identifying with this reaction, let's say, to that other person? What are the dangers for you? How might it disrupt your relationships? How might it create painful experiences for you? How might it create more health burdens on you? What scientists now call allostatic load of rumination or repetitive patterns of stressful contraction. Right? What's the danger for you? And maybe the danger for others. So with this person who I know well, who's pretty darn feisty, I could see him immediately getting a little snarky back. That was going to have some dangers to it. And then the Buddha has the third thing, as after we recognize the gratifications, the payoffs in our reaction cascade, and we also recognize the dangers, the costs to others as well as to us. What is the escape? The gratifications, the dangers, and the escape. Escape's an interesting word, isn't it? It's a kind of corner turning right there. We turn the corner. We escape. They're on that other street. We're going down a different road. Bye-bye. Woo! Doesn't it feel great to escape? I think about childhood games of hide and seek and tag, and it just feels great to get away, right? And the escape essentially a lot is through, like I'm saying, the insight into the elements of what we're experiencing, and also a kind of a choosing. A key thing that's involved in turning a corner is the sense of choice. Choice and timing, and giving to yourself the opportunity, even the right, perhaps the encouragement to turn that corner and escape. That's a very useful structure, isn't it? To observe the gratifications, the danger, and the opportunity for escape. Now, to be really clear, certain kinds of material come up again and again and again. I recall a little previously, I think before our break, a comment from Liz Weiner. Basically, Liz said, well, what do we do with early childhood trauma material that keeps coming up? What do we do about that? And here, I want to say that, with the power invested in me by the Board of Psychology in California and a lot of research in clinical psychology, I think there are certain injuries that can occur in this life that will pain us, that will continue to pain us whenever we're aware of them, to some extent. Now, some injuries we will recall, or we will know. We will never forget what actually happened, and we may continue to see it a certain way and have even a moral view about the people who did that to us and so on in all their complexity. But we don't have a charge on it anymore. It doesn't grab us. It's not upsetting. It doesn't occupy us. On the other hand, sometimes I still think back on a little moment. I was a kind of a shy, scaredy cat of a kid. Still, I got involved in a little moment of roughhousing with this other boy who was my friend. I was in 7th grade. I was young going through school, so you can imagine, I don't know how old I was, pretty young, maybe 10 or 11. And I kind of trapped him in a roughhousing way, and I experienced the gratification of physically dominating him in some roughhousing. And he didn't like it. And after, not that long, maybe 10 or 12 seconds, I released him, and our friendship was forever changed after that. And I still feel, as I speak right now, about that. I don't feel horrible to myself. I was a kid. I was rambunctious, Actually, I was feeling my own power in some way, gratification, right? But I wasn't aware of the danger, and I did not escape, and it had consequences. So it may be, and this is a very small example. I could think of others in which things were, done to me. I was mistreated in some ways, not terrible ways, and still makes me mad. I feel guilty about certain things. There's things that happen to us. We still naturally feel them. We have losses. I've had losses in my life, and when I'm reminded of them, I still feel them. There's a place for that. And the danger is getting preoccupied. Yes, feel the feelings, explore what's there to the extent it's useful, but at a certain point, there's just no more value in it, right? There's nothing more to experience about it. There's no more lesson to be gained. There's no more atonement to offer, right? There's no more amends to offer. And at that point, what do we do? And I personally think, and you decide if it's okay for you to do it, I think it's okay to take yourself by the hand and say, it's okay. It's okay. Come on. we can turn a corner. And give yourself permission to do that. And to deliberately move your attention away from what, negativity bias of the brain might keep kind of drawing you back in. There's a place for regulating our attention, including toward internal objects, not just external, but internal objects of attention. Much as we go out in the world and we regulate our attention. I mean, for me as a man, I'm careful about my gaze moving through the world, and appropriately so. We regulate our attention in different kinds of ways to what we pay attention to. We're watching the news maybe, or something happens and somebody comes on and we watch it for the first 30, 90 seconds and we start to realize, wow, I'm getting really sucked in here. No added value. I basically got it. Change the channel, right? We regulate our external attention. It's completely the same. It's okay to regulate internal attention. If you feel in your judgment that you have processed enough, you have felt it enough, you have suffered enough, you have atoned enough, you have repented enough, that you can turn a corner for yourself. Do you know what that feels like? And if not, I really encourage you to find out. What does it feel like to, out of wisdom and compassion for yourself, much as you would with a friend, say, dear friend, you have really worked on this one. It's not going to change. We can't change the past also. You got the lesson. You got the message. You can turn a corner now. You can turn a corner now. And then the next time it comes up, you can turn the corner now and now. Right? Do you know what that feels like? It's a beautiful thing. I think about just versions of that. Phrases you might use for a friend or a child or for yourself. And I'm going to give you some examples of all kinds. Like, sweetie, you don't need to worry about that. How about some from you? So I'm seeing a really important comment here from Mary Lynn at 7 o'clock, top of the hour, reading it. Infancy trauma abuse is pre-verbal. That's right. This is simply not resolvable. It's ever present in every cell of my body. No matter how I try to process it out of my body, I just can't shake it. No matter what therapies or modalities or spiritual paths I've followed, it's far too deep to tackle. And I think, Mary Lynn, what yours is relating to what I was saying about some injuries, I think, we carry with us. We carry those injuries with us. Last week, I talked about living with loss. A version of that is living with injury, living with damage, potentially. And then how do we live with that? And I think it's really important to honor the injury and to recognize it and to protect ourselves about it, because injuries often leave vulnerabilities to additional injuries. So enough that injury happened, let's protect ourselves so we're not injured again and again, not re-traumatized, let's say, again and again. We do that, and in my view, you decide, we really, really turn toward what is also true. Meanwhile, what else is true? So much is also true. And we kind of turn a corner from, okay, there is an injury. We're not denying it. It's right there on that street. And right now, I'm resting my attention in another street. I've turned a corner in terms of where my attention is resting. And I think it's really important to appreciate what Mary Lynn is saying, and Lori can relate to it, is that I think sometimes, and I say this as a longtime clinician, on the one hand, we can underestimate the power, the effectiveness of sophisticated mental skills, including from indigenous traditions, not always Western science evidence-based traditions. There are different kinds of evidence. Hello. So we can still engage. Really, on the one hand, we can underestimate the power of serious, deep effort and practice that's skillful, often guided by somebody who's very skillful at it. We can underestimate how good it could be for us to pursue that for some reasonable amount of time, certainly months, sometimes years. On the other hand, we can keep banging our head against a wall of what ain't going to shift inside because it's just wired in too deeply into our body. And we can feel kind of bad about ourselves, like, oh, I'm a bad client, I'm a bad meditator. No, you're a good human with a good nervous system that's designed to be changed by your experiences, especially painful ones that occur in childhood with other people. That's the big three of what's particularly resistant to neuroplastic change. I want to particularly talk about turning a corner related to things getting worse in your body, your health, maybe a relationship, your country, the world. Things getting worse. Sometimes things get worse. I'm going to use a vulgar turn of phrase in a moment. If you want to turn a corner and mute your sound in a moment, you can feel free to do that. So, quick point here. In nature, phenomena appear in clusters. They cluster together. An exactly even distribution of clouds in the sky, exactly even, would be like on a grid in the sky. That would be deeply unnatural. Trees, being exactly equidistant from each other in a forest, that's unnatural. Natural phenomena cluster together. Well, sometimes in history, sometimes in politics, in a country at particular times, things cluster together and become, ready? A clusterfuck. Sometimes we live in the middle of a clusterfuck. Perfect storm. Stuff happens. It, comes together. And what do we do then? What's the Buddha's wisdom of turning a corner applicable here? Recalling a course that he taught at a time in which famines, slavery, atrocities, brutality, certainly patriarchy, and other things were widely common. And so we can practice even when things are really tough and even while they get worse. Think about the example of the Dalai Lama and many, many others, Tibetans, some monastics, some ordinary people who are practicing with their own country having been occupied brutally by the government of China, distinct from the people of China, for well over 50 years, with many atrocities along the way. And yet, as the Dalai Lama put it, he said something with regard to my friends, the Chinese government, my adversary, the adversarial Chinese government. So, point is, what do we do, right? I think it's helpful to realize that throughout history, millions, billions of people have lived in really tough societies, even in extreme conditions under, the thumb of tyranny, full-out tyranny. And they found a way to live. And to me, turning a corner means realizing, okay, whatever my circumstances are, I am going to try to find a way to live well meanwhile. Which, if you're like me, is a fairly rebellious, kind of surly person to, being pushed around, has the satisfaction the healthy gratification of being a kind of up yours. I'm going to live well, meanwhile, as best I can, and I'm going to preserve as much as I can, including my innermost being that's intact. That's a kind of corner turning, right? That I think is really relevant very often for people these days. The Buddha talked about his own practice as he was approaching awakening as painful feelings arising in the mind, but not invading him and remaining. And I think we can turn a corner, in a sense, by basically saying, no, the street I'm walking, you will not invade. You will not invade my innermost being. I will not feed you. I will not follow you. I will not be caught up in yelling at the television about you. I am walking a different road, and you cannot stop me from doing that inside the innermost heart of my being. Okay? My 2 cents. So see what you think. Then I also want to talk about turning a corner in our sense of self. And I'm going to do it this way. Basically, we often address our thoughts. There is a place for thoughts. The Eightfold Path, the way the list of eight usually starts with wise view. We're cultivating wise view. There's a place for that. Good. Under those particular thoughts and beliefs we have are different, our assumptions, expectations, models of others and oneself, frames of different kinds, meanings. Okay, that's cognition. Under that, more deeply, are emotions and sensations and desires. And even more deeply, in terms of its influence, is the underlying identity, underlying sense of self. So if we're trying to help ourselves or help another person, where are we going to get the most bang for the buck? What's going to have the most highly leveraged, far-reaching benefit? It's generally not our beliefs, our verbally expressed beliefs. There's a place for that, but that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. Deeper is our emotions and sensations and desires, and deeper than that even is to get a sense of our sense of self. So think about the corner to turn, or a corner to turn, in how you regard yourself. Maybe you are carrying, as I have a lot in my life, underlying feelings of sort of inadequacy, or just not being aware of your own natural goodness and specific good qualities. Maybe you've been carrying a sense of identity as being a bad person. It is said that guilt is the sense of I did bad. Shame is the sense of I am bad. So can we turn a corner in how we regard ourselves, the sense of who we are? And you can kind of feel it. If you even want to do like a little experiment here, if you were to really dramatize and exaggerate a sense of identity as a kind of broken, inadequate, tainted, damaged, person, let's say, broken, let's say, rather than damaged, broken. What is, how would you carry yourself moving through your day with that sense of self? On the other hand, letting that go, okay? On the other hand, if you had a sense of yourself as upright and dignified, the Buddha has a lot of encouragement to people to authentically adopt a sense of yourself as worthy, as large-hearted, inherently good, right? Worthy of care, how do you sit then? How do you stand then? How do you hold yourself? And if you imagine some key interactions or key relationships, how would you be in those interactions or relationships? On the one hand, if you were having a sense of yourself as kind of like ick, or meh, oh yeah, meh. Versus how would you be with those people or those interactions if, without being pompous or arrogant or pushy, just like, hey, like, I'm not perfect, far from perfect, but I'm coming into this with a lot of quality and a lot of character and a lot of virtue and a lot of good intentions and a lot of history of really showing up as like definitely an all right person. How would you be? How would you conduct yourself? And so one of the things we can really turn a corner on is our sense of self, our self-concept that's more conceptual, but especially our sense of ourself in our belly and bones, right? What's it like to turn that corner? That's a corner I've been working on in my own life, to have a sense of believing in and trusting in and taking refuge in a sense of just innate natural goodness without, and in fact, when I settle into that, any residue of defensive superiority just falls away because there's no basis for it. So to turn that corner, and then I'll really dive into some more questions here. I think it's really helpful, on the one hand, to turn this corner in terms of sense of self, to identify as who you really are. It helps to give yourself absolution and forgiveness for some of the things that like kind of drag you down into that other sense of yourself. And to say things to yourself like, I forgive you, or you have already paid a price, you have already paid enough, or, just absolution. Even absolution, which I believe is sometimes the case in certain contexts. Absolution that in a way is undeserved, beyond earning it or something, or like what you have to do to prove yourself good enough. Just absolution, washed clean. That there's a place for that sense of that, to turn this particular corner. And then also there's the factor or the value, if you want to turn this corner in your sense of yourself, as things you say to yourself, maybe even write to yourself. You remind yourself of who you really are. You maybe make a little list. I've done this kind of thing of 3 to 5 qualities that are both who you are and who you are becoming. And you can take, as they say in Tibet, you can take the fruit as the path. You can take a way of naming what you are growing into as who you are already, and give yourself over to that. Give yourself over to that already as your identity. Okay. And then as you turn the corner, and walk down that other street, enjoy it, appreciate the value of it, get used to that new street, whether it's you just don't do that old argument with your Uncle Bob, or you just disengage from that kind of reaction to other people's reactions. Maybe that's your new street. Maybe your new street is one where you just let it sink in that you've paid enough of a price and you're walking down a different road now. Whatever it might be, enjoy that corner that you've turned and enjoy the new street you're walking down. That'll help you stabilize there and establish it increasingly for yourself. So what do you make of all this? What do you make of this notion of turning a corner and including giving yourself permission to, often being deliberate about it. Sometimes you need to kind of take yourself by hand. Maybe large portions of you are saying things like, no, I want to ruminate about that. No, I'm really into beating myself up about that. And you go, no, come on. No. The other parts you want, no, I really want to get mad at them. I really want to be righteous about them. I really, want to build up my case about them. No. You kind of take yourself by the hand and you help yourself turn that corner. Okay, what do you make of all this topic, turning a corner? By the way, what Elaine brings up here, does it help to think, if I can do this situation over, what would I have preferred to say? Yeah, I think a so-called fearless and searching inventory, love that phrase, from Alcoholics Anonymous, includes, when you look at what you've done, honestly, what you could have done better. And then, I think it's really useful to distinguish between opportunities for greater skillfulness, which sometimes involve regret. Like, oh, okay, I wish I'd been more skillful then, but I will be more skillful now. That's different from moral fault, which calls for appropriate guilt, remorse, perhaps even appropriate shame. There's a place for that, but that's really different. And most of the time when we look back at our mistakes and regrets, we woulda, coulda, shoulda been more skillful. And there's not really a basis for guilt, remorse, or shame. And to distinguish between those two, even if other people want you to feel guilty or remorseful or ashamed, you get to decide, no, what's genuinely worthy of, remorse, guilt, and shame, and what is simply a matter of skillful correction from now on. That's really helpful when you look at things from the past. And once you've gotten the message, once you've learned the lesson about skillful correction, or you've really processed appropriately whatever is, appropriate for a moral fault, you decide what is actually a moral fault. You decide. When you've worked that through, made amends, done the best you can, and moved into forgiveness for yourself in ways that feel authentic and real for you, then sometimes you really have to tell yourself, it's okay, you can turn a corner. That's the missing piece for many people. They really have identified skillful correction, and they really have processed appropriate remorse, let's say, but they have not given themselves permission to turn a corner, which sometimes means I'm going to help myself not think about that anymore. My habit of thought keeps dragging me back down that other road. I get it, negativity bias. I'm going to help myself not think about that in the future. I'm going to help myself. I'm not denying it, but I'm going to, turn a corner away from it. Yeah. What if you cannot make amends? Very often, hugely important question. I phone Susan. We often cannot fix things we've done. And turning a corner means accepting I cannot repair the damage I did. I've reflected on catastrophic mistakes that I've made. Very few people have not made at least one catastrophic mistake in their life. I have friends who are excellent doctors, and they know that it's really hard to be a doctor under certain conditions, such as intense emergency room medicine, battlefield medicine, tough, complicated surgeries, very complicated care. It's really hard to get through a medical career in certain areas as a physician or nurse and not know that you were involved in the preventable death of somebody. How do you lead troops in combat? How do you lead firefighters into burning buildings and not know that at some level you were involved in some choices that had catastrophic consequences? Very few people. Very few people. You might feel like you're alone. It's common humanity. People can make big mistakes. I've made big mistakes as a parent that have, long-term consequences. They cannot, you can't fix it. You can do the best you can around it. And sometimes we make mistakes with people. We realize it. They're no longer alive. I sure wish I could apologize to my parents about a variety of things from my teen years onward. Obviously, teenagers are less morally culpable, but still, they have a lot of agency, still, that have effects on their family systems, including their parents. So, but we can't do it. What do? We name it, we know it. I can't fix those things. In our hearts, we know that we did something wrong. We are not defending against it. We take appropriate responsibility while also recognizing the many, many other things in the mix. Many other people, many other forces in our lives in the mix in what we did ourselves. And often in the mix, what other people were doing too. And we look at all that and then we go, okay, I can't fix that. Maybe we try to be a better person in other areas. If you take a real look at the total balance sheet of your life, assets and liabilities, pluses and minuses, I would be astonished if the balance sheet in your life were not overwhelmingly positive, including in the days to come, knowing that as context for the things we cannot make amends for. And then you basically say, okay, I'm going to carry that guilt. It's a kind of injury, a moral injury. I'm going to carry it with me. I'm always going to wince whenever I think about that. And I permit myself to turn a corner here. I encourage myself to turn a corner here. In part because in that corner turning, I will be less bedeviled by and preoccupied by and burdened by my past. And I will be more able to radiate my true gifts in this life outward for the sake of others. Someone asks privately, shame is more like I'm bad, and it tends to be really, really primal. And the gesture of shame in evolution, the biology of shame is around subordination. Betas who are carried by shame to submit to alphas so they won't be hurt anymore, kind of like that. And guilt tends to be more cerebral, more of a sense of, complex standards, including moral standards. I think of remorse as something quite beautiful, actually. I told a friend of mine a long time ago that when you're feeling guilty, someone's lying to you, including you're lying to yourself about what really happened. I mean, there's a place for feeling guilt, and I'm not going to, parse these things too much semantically, but I think of remorse as a very healthy remorse. It's like, ouch. Remorse to me is simpler than guilt and more direct and more real and healthy and to be felt, and then, to be processed, to be felt, and then to be moved on from. But you decide for yourself, what works best for you. At bottom, the distinction between unskillfulness and moral fault is incredibly useful. And you get to decide what the difference is between those two, including in the face of others who are wagging that moralistic, guilt-tripping, shaming finger at you. You get to decide what's actually a true moral fault, and rather than just unskillfulness. And even looking at other people, we can be kind of uppity about other people, me included, but actually they're just being unskillful. They don't really know any better. They never learned to do better. They got carried away. They weren't regulated. They were unskillful and banged into us pretty hard. Not denying that, but it's not that they're a bad person or have evil intent. They just weren't very skillful, including skillfulness in managing their own thoughts and feelings. Okay. So finishing up here, I'm going to turn a corner and move on to the next phase. And I really invite you, when all of this sort of settles down, to find the feeling that is sort of related to the image of, you're on a street, you could turn toward what is there and get caught up in it. Or you could take a breath, you're at the corner, what are you going to do? And you could choose to walk down a different road. The feeling of that, what that's like inside yourself, including the sense of advocacy and support and kindness for yourself, is the essence, the heart of what we've been exploring tonight. So truly, thank you for your kind attention.